The frost came early that year. November 4th, 1987, 6:14 in the morning. The sky over Millbrook County was the color of a bruise. Purple, then gray, then nothing at all. Walt Hendricks stood on his porch in his undershirt. No coat. He didn't feel the cold yet. That would come later. 3 cars rolled up his gravel driveway. Slow, careful, like they didn't want to wake anyone. Too late for that. 2 U.S. Marshals, 1 county sheriff's deputy, and a man in a gray wool coat holding a leather folder against his chest like a shield. Gary Pruitt didn't want to be there. You could see in the way he walked, short steps, eyes down, boots crunching on frozen gravel like he was trying not to make a sound. The tractor was still running. Nobody remembered to shut it off. The old John Deere 4020, parked outside the machine shed since yesterday afternoon, just kept idling. Diesel smoke curled up in the cold air and hung there, gray against gray, going nowhere. Ruth Hendricks came out the screen door, still holding a dish towel. She didn't say a word. She just looked at the folder in that man's hands like it was a snake. Walt. Her voice cracked on his name. Daniel was 19. He came out barefoot, ignoring the frost biting into his feet, and grabbed his father's arm before Walt even realized he'd taken a step forward. "Don't," Daniel said. "Just that. Don't." The marshal nailed the notice to the barn door. For nails. Steady hammer strikes that echoed off the hills like gunshots. Notice of foreclosure. 90 years. 3 generations. 90 years of this family waking up before the sun, feeding stock in the dark, pulling calves in the mud, praying over dry summers and drowning springs. 90 years, undone in the time it took to swing a hammer 4 times. Walt didn't raise the shotgun leaning by the door. He just stood there. Something in him had already gone quiet, the way a light goes out before the bulb even breaks. Ruth's dish towel slipped from her hands into the dirt. Nobody picked it up. And somewhere behind the house, that tractor kept running. Rusted green paint, a crack across the seat, a machine that had plowed the same dirt for 20 years, idling patiently, waiting for someone to come turn the key, waiting for a day that, for now, would never come. Nobody in that yard knew it yet. But 30 years from this frozen morning, that same machine, its serial number, warm but legible, will be the one small, stubborn fact that no lawyer, no bank, no judge could argue away. If you're watching this from a small town, the kind of town where everybody knows whose land is whose, drop where you're from in the comments below. And if stories like this one hit you somewhere real, hit subscribe, because this story is far from over. The bank took the land in November. By January, they'd taken the house too. Walt and Ruth moved into a rented place on the edge of town, a small clapboard house with a leaking roof and a yard too small to turn a truck around in. Ruth used to say the whole place could fit inside their old kitchen. Walt got work at the grain elevator. A man who'd once owned 340 acres now stood in a dust-choked tower, shoveling other men's corn into other men's trucks. He never complained. He just got quieter. Year by year quieter. His hands changed first. The calluses from the tractor wheel faded, replaced by new ones from the elevator chains. Ruth noticed it one night, holding his hand across the dinner table, and she cried without knowing exactly why. His heart went next. By 1991, he was on pills for his blood pressure. By 1994, there was a scare that put him in Millbrook General for 4 days. The doctor used the word stress a lot. Ruth never told him what she thought, that it wasn't stress. It was grief, slow grief, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that just sits on a man's chest a little heavier every year. Ruth kept a cardboard box in the back of her closet. Every letter from the bank, every receipt, every scrap of paper from that November. Friends told her to let it go, move on, stop carrying it around like a stone in her pocket. She never listened. Something in her, some old farm instinct, The kind that tells you to save seed corn even in a bad year, told her to keep every piece of it. Daniel left first chance he got. 19 years old, barefoot in the frost that morning, and by 20 he was gone. Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, working construction, framing houses for other families while his own family's house belonged to a bank ledger somewhere. He didn't come home for Thanksgiving, didn't come home for Christmas. He told himself he was busy. The truth was simpler and uglier. He couldn't stand to drive past the old gate and see somebody else's cattle in his grandfather's pasture. The land itself didn't sit empty long. A holding company out of Chicago bought it at auction for pennies on the dollar, then leased it to a corporate operation that planted fence row to fence row. No rotation, no rest. The barn came down within 2 years. Nobody kept the old machine shed either. It just sat there, sagging a little more every winter, home to barn swallows and rust. Inside it, forgotten under a tarp nobody bothered to remove, sat the old 4020. Serial number stamped into cold steel. Waiting. Gary Pruitt left banking in 1990. He never said why out loud. But people in town noticed. He stopped going to church suppers where the Hendricks name still came up in quiet conversation. Guilt has a way of making a man disappear a little at a time, the same way grief had done to Walt. Ruth Hendricks turned 80 in the spring of 2016. Walt had been gone 7 years by then. Hart, finally, in his sleep, in a rented house that never once felt like home no matter how many years they spent in it. The stroke came in March. Small, the doctor said. A warning, not a catastrophe. But it was enough to bring Daniel back from Cedar Rapids for good. 48 years old now, gray at the temples, still carrying the guilt of every missed Thanksgiving like a stone in his coat pocket. He was cleaning out her closet on a Tuesday afternoon when he found the box. Cardboard, soft at the corners, held together with packing tape gone brittle and yellow. The kind of box you almost throw away without looking inside. Daniel almost did exactly that. Instead, he sat down on the edge of his mother's bed and opened it. Dust, the smell of old paper, dry as October corn stalks. Letters from Millbrook Farmers and Merchants Bank, typed on machines that didn't exist anymore. The original 1981 loan agreement, Walt's signature shaky even then, before any of this happened. And near the bottom, a single sheet that didn't belong with the rest, an internal bank memo, dated 1986, stapled in nothing, explaining nothing, just sitting there like it had been waiting 30 years for somebody to finally read it. Daniel almost tossed the whole box in a garbage bag. He didn't. He drove it to town instead. Melissa Okafor's office sat above the old hardware store on Main Street. 34 years old, sharp-eyed, a law degree from Drake. She'd earned working nights at a call center. Her car had 190,000 miles on it and a check engine light she'd learned to ignore. She took the cases nobody else wanted. Foreclosure fights, farm debt, the kind of clients who paid in installments of $50 or not at all. She spread the papers across her desk under a desk lamp that buzzed faintly. Hours passed. Coffee went cold. Then she stopped. "This valuation," she said, tapping a line on the original loan document. "It's from 1979. Iowa law required an updated assessment before repossession. This is 7 years old by the time they foreclose." Daniel didn't understand yet what that meant. Neither did Ruth, sitting in the next room with her hands folded in her lap, the same hands that had dropped a dish towel in the dirt 30 years before. Melissa kept reading, and then she found it, buried in the collateral list, a line item easy to miss. 1-1 John Deere 4020 tractor. Serial number 118-4509732. She checked it against the original lien filing from 1981. The numbers didn't match. Not a typo. Not close. A completely different machine. The bank had seized a tractor it never legally had a claim to. Melissa sat back slowly in her chair, the old springs creaking under her. "Mrs. Hendricks," she said quietly, "I think your bank made a mistake in 1987, and I think we can prove it. The lawsuit took 18 months just to get in front of the judge. Millbrook Farmers and Merchants Bank didn't exist anymore. Swallowed up in 1994 by a larger regional bank. Its name reduced to a line item in some merger document nobody read twice. That didn't matter to Melissa. Liability doesn't disappear just because a name does. The successor bank sent lawyers from Des Moines. 3 of them, sharp suits, sharper billing rates. Their argument was simple. Too much time had passed. Statute of limitations. Let sleeping dogs lie. Melissa had an answer ready. The discovery rule. A family can't be blamed for not suing over fraud they didn't know existed. Ruth didn't find that memo in 2016 because she was looking for it. She found it because a stroke put her in a hospital bed and her son cleaned out a closet. The clock doesn't start, Melissa argued, until the truth surfaces. She needed a witness who could speak to what happened inside that bank in 1987. There was only one man left who could. Gary Pruitt was 83 now, living alone outside Millbrook in a house too quiet for a man his age. Melissa found him on a Tuesday, sitting on his porch, hands folded the way old men's hands fold when they've made peace with waiting. He didn't argue when she told him why she'd come. He almost seemed relieved. They wanted those loans off the books before the audit, he said, voice thin but steady. Regulators were coming in the spring of '87. Corporate told us to move fast, faster than the law allowed, if I'm honest with you. He paused, looking out at nothing in particular. I've thought about that morning for 30 years, he said. The wife, the dish towel in the dirt. I hear that sound sometimes. Nails going into that barn door. He testified in federal court that October, reluctant at first, his voice barely above a whisper. Then something loosened in him, like a knot untying after 3 decades pulled tight. He told the court about the rushed timeline, the pressure from above, the valuations nobody bothered updating because nobody thought anyone would ever check. Daniel testified too. 48 years old, a grown man, and his voice broke anyway when he described his father's face that November morning. The way Walt didn't raise the shotgun, the way something in him had already gone quiet before the hammer even struck the nail. Ruth sat in the gallery in her wheelchair, the same cardboard box resting in her lap. Corner soft from 30 years of handling, but it was the tractor that closed the case. 2 serial numbers. One on the 1981 lien filing. One on the 1987 collateral seizure. No expert testimony needed. No complicated argument about intent or negligence. Just numbers, stamped in cold steel, that didn't match. The bank's lawyers had no answer for it. There wasn't one to give. The verdict came down on a gray Tuesday in April 2019. Federal Court, Southern District of Iowa. Judge's voice flat and even, reading words that would change everything. Wrongful seizure. Breach of lien terms. Damages compounded across 32 years of lost land value, lost income, lost equity that should have grown quietly in the ground like corn nobody was allowed to plant. $14 million. Ruth didn't cry. She just closed her eyes for a moment, the cardboard box still resting on her lap, and let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since November of 1987. Outside the courthouse, reporters pushed microphones toward her. She didn't have much to say. 83 years old, wheelchair, hands folded the same way Gary Pruitt's had folded on his porch. Walt should have seen this, she said finally. That's all. He should have seen this. Daniel drove out to the old property that same week. The land looked nothing like it used to. Fence row to fence row now, corporate rows, no pasture left for cattle. No barn standing where the notice had once been nailed to the door. He stood where the barn used to be for a long time, hands in his coat pockets, saying nothing to nobody. Gary Pruitt gave one last interview before he passed away the following year. Sitting on that same porch, hands still folded. "I never forgot the sound," he said. Ruth screaming. The tractor running when nobody remembered to shut it off. Testifying was the first time in 30 years I could breathe right. Part of the settlement went to buying back 40 acres of the original farm. Not all of it. That wasn't possible anymore, but enough. Enough for Daniel to put up a new machine shed. Enough for Ruth to sit on a porch again and look out at land that had her family's name on the deed. And in that shed, restored piece by piece over 8 months of weekends, sat the old John Deere 4020. Same rusted green frame. Same crack in the seat. Same serial number stamped into steel that had waited 32 years to matter. Daniel turned the key on a cold morning in October, not unlike the one that had taken everything away. The engine coughed once, then settled into a steady, patient idle. The same sound that had drifted over that yard back in 1987, except this time, somebody was there to hear it. This time, somebody meant to leave it running. Ruth watched from the porch, a blanket over her knees, and for the first time in 32 years, the sound of that engine didn't feel like loss. It felt like home.